We listen to somebody like Vince Staple and we consider him to be refreshing. He sounds like a thinker. He sounds intelligent. He sounds like he's on to something. We consider there to be no harm with the things that he says because he sounds stern and convinced. You remember 2 years ago when he made that statement about 90s hip hop being overrated, which is something I had no problem with, by the way. He's well within his right to say that 90s hip hop wasn't what everybody, makes it out to be. But the moronic comment that he made within that statement is when he said, what were the 90s about? Tupac, Biggie, that's it. The 90s were about a lot more than Tupac and Biggie, and those of us who were listening to hip hop and who actually had hair on our nuts when it was happening understood that. But that's Vince's youth, it's his ignorance. That's fine. You can just ignore that statement. So he's interviewed at Complex, and the interviewer asked him about Remy Ma and Nicki Minaj's beef, and he says it's corny. All beefs are corny. The interviewer says Jay-Z and Nas, he says corny. KRS-One, MC Shan, corny. Ice Cube versus NWA, corny. We think there's no harm in this, but I'll tell you where the harm is. If you think about the majority of rappers that we have today, the young guys out here, and the things that they say, and there's not really much thought put into whatever it is that they have to say. We're very familiar with these younger guys sort of revolting against the norm, the old head conventions of, what they thought hip hop was. And they're sort of, spinning that around in a full 180 and just going like, no, fuck 90s hip hop. Drake is better than Biggie. I think that's what Lil Yachty said. I'm not even sure. That's not really important. But we're used to this today. The harm in that is, I think, younger artists listening to that. And if Vince Staple has no desire to jump into a beef or to battle somebody, that's perfectly fine. But I think once we start to lose the competitive aspect in all this shit, I think that's when the music gets worse. We can all agree that most of what we hear these days is terrible. That's why there's so many conversations about Kendrick Lamar being the greatest rapper of all time, by the way. Kendrick is the greatest rapper right now. Of all time, he's not even close. But the reason why we continue to have this argument is because there's so many shitty rappers out right now that it makes Kendrick look a whole lot greater than what he really is. And indeed, he is great, but it makes him look a lot greater than what he is. When Vince Staple makes statements like this, the competitive aspect just goes right out the window. And this thing becomes what these newer artists want this to become. They want it to turn into this honor amongst thieves. We shouldn't ruffle any feathers because that would be dangerous. Everybody has their own lane. That's when everybody becomes too prosperous for their own good. If you start thinking that any bit of conflict is terrible, or as Vince said, I'm not going to book studio time to talk about you. The way he supports this is by saying, why would I make, I'm going to say terrible things about you for the sake of hip hop? What would be the difference between 99.9 of the tracks that you hear today, which are braggadocious, which are people saying horrible shit to imaginary opponents? In most cases, they're not imaginary at all. They're a lot of subs. What's the difference between that and actually directing that towards somebody? Oh, it's only terrible if you put somebody's name in it? That doesn't make any sense. That's the base of all this, ladies and gentlemen. When you listen to a rapper, let's use a recent example. Let's use a particular specific moment on Kendrick's damn record that we all know and love, and it hasn't even been a week yet. When that beat changes at the end of DNA, tell me something. You motherfuckers can't tell me nothing. When you listen to that delivery, when you listen to that approach, that is battling. That is beef. That is him coming at somebody. In this particular record, that's him coming up, up against right-wing conservatives, Geraldo Rivera. So that's him making a statement against them. But 99.9% of the time, it's just a rapper saying it in general because he thinks he is the best. So if we can all agree that this is at the base of what makes up hip hop, you as a hip hop artist shouldn't say things like it's corny, especially when you can't back up the statement. That was the problem with the 90s hip hop comment. When he went back and forth with Noriega on Twitter, he didn't really have any leg to stand on. It didn't make any sense. He just said it just to say it. So that's the danger that can be done. Younger artists or artists right now hear it and it's just, well, yeah, it's not really competitive. And then everybody takes sort of a passive approach. I don't want a passive approach in my music. I don't want records to sound like they have no feeling in them, no passion in them whatsoever. Again, I will continue to say this. If you do not understand that the very spirit of an MC sticking out his chest on a song like DNA, if you don't understand that that is derived, what it's taken from is that very essence of KRS-One versus MC Shan, of Jay-Z versus Nas, Ice Cube versus Common, Ice Cube versus NWA, Cannabis versus LL Cool J. Just run down the list. That's what it's from. So when you call it corny, you don't understand what you're saying. The problem is this also. Because we have so many, rambling rappers who don't fucking say anything in interviews when you really get to know who they are, is that we seem to confuse somebody like Vince Staples as a very thought-provoking person, as somebody who knows where the culture is going. I don't think that's what he is at all. I think he's somebody who's very contemptuous in interviews. He doesn't seem to like them very much. So he'll just make dismissive comments when he doesn't like the topic of the question. When he doesn't like what he's being asked, he just sort of dismisses it. And you shouldn't confuse that for him being intelligent or him being a thinker. It just seems like he's intolerant of talking about things that he doesn't want to talk about. And we shouldn't confuse the two just because we have a bunch of people who just throw on a pair of sunglasses or put a mask over their face and just sort of mumble their way through interviews and just say monosyllable fucking answers to everything. We shouldn't look at him like he's this great thing or this, this intellectual just because everybody else is a fucking idiot. For the same reason that we shouldn't confuse Kendrick for being the greatest of all time because a lot of people sound like shit. But what do you guys think in the comments section? Do you agree with Vince Staples' comments about beef? I hope you guys don't. Because if you do, I'm going to kill myself. I'm literally going to kill myself. If one of the comments in the comment section below is I agree with Vince Staples and you should kill yourself, D, I'm going to kill myself. This is my last video and I won't see you guys next week. So let me know in the comment section below. And I will definitely fucking see you guys next time.